up, everybody, this week? Hopefully, everybody's having a good week. And yeah, I always just enjoy people having good weeks. I'm having a great week. Um, Sorry, my mind is just like dancing. I was listening to some music before I hopped on to do this. I'll do that sometimes just to kind of inspire me, and it doesn't even have to be like anything inspiring. Um, I was actually just listening to some Counting Crows. Um, Very one of my favorite bands, right? That might age me and put me where I'm at, but I like them. I enjoy them. So this week I want to talk about the attitude of growth. One of my favorite attitudes to talk about because there's so much I can talk about. I guess all the attitudes are there's lots to talk about. And one day, promise you, one day there will be a compilation of all of that in a nice little handy book. Until then, YouTube videos and Facebook Live videos are the only way to get the content. So, um, yeah, if you're watching on YouTube, you can hit subscribe or whatever, or come follow me for those in the Facebook group that want to go to YouTube. I'll start doing more over there as the months come along. A little bit of foreshadowing for this year, but that's one goal I want to provide lots of free content so people can understand the attitudes of money to their fullest. So yeah, go over there and like it. Or you can just dig through the Facebook group if you're part of that. It's a little bit harder, and that's why I want to change it so it can be easy to find it. And on YouTube, there's playlists I've set up for each attitude. So as I live stream about the attitudes, and when I move them over to YouTube, then they're put there. So if you just want to binge on attitude of command, go do that, like what we talked about last week. This week we're talking about attitude of growth. So if you want to learn more about the growth and this attitude, then you can watch the playlist and understand more about it. So just some helpful tips if you want to know specifically about one. If you've taken the attitudes of money little quiz that I have for the download, and you're like, wait, Joe, what does this mean? There's lots of content over there on YouTube. More being added, more to add, but just kind of, I wanted to kind of combine it together so you could go take the quiz, figure out which attitude you need to work on, and then you can be like, well, what does this mean, Joe? Because there's only a little bit in there. Well, I've done lots of live streams. I've done lots of content based on each attitude, so that will help you get a little idea of what each one is about and give you some more context around different scenarios, different stories, different pieces that I've talked about. So there you go. If you have questions, if you're like, Joe, this attitude I'm struggling with, I'm not quite sure, let me know what the specific question is because I can take a week and talk about it. I love questions. I love people chiming in to be like, hey, I need some help. Real life stories are always the best because I can show you exactly how it plays in with whichever attitude you're struggling with at the moment. Or not even struggling, because that makes it sound like there's a problem. It's whatever one you want to up level. Because sometimes it's just about like, this one's working for me, but I need a refresher and to increase kind of what I'm doing there. Hence the reason for this week, right? Why what you have done will only get you to where you are currently. Now this concept, you hear some people talking about it, but it's really about the concept of what I've done up until now brings me to this point. And that seems like a no-brainer, but I got to call it out because it's not always a no-brainer to everybody. You've done certain things to get to where you're at. In your business, you've put certain things in place and it's helped you grow as far as you can for where you're at this point in time, right? You have so much revenue coming in. You might have products out there. Are they awesome? Like awesome, I'm sure they're awesome products, but are they like awesome in a way that they're like fully put together? Are they version 1.0? Right? I came from the IT world where, even in software development, version 1.0 usually nobody likes because it's not polished. Functionality is there, the concept is there, but version 2, version 3, version 5, version 15, right? We've taken time to add features and increase it. So wherever you're at, I want you to look at that on the inside and just say, like, guess what? Today, if I haven't done this before, guess what? Today, this is, for example, for me, Joe. This is Joe. Oh, I can't even say 1.0, but maybe for you it might be, hey, today I'm making the thing to be like, today this is 1.0 me, right? Because what we've done to get to where we're at has given us a lot of wisdom. We know what to do, what not to do, maybe. Now I want to call that out because some of us, and this is how I was a few years ago, and not even very many years ago, like I would say 6, 7 years ago, I was living life and I was just like kind of existing. I had a great job. I had a good marriage. Like Debbie and I's marriage was good. It wasn't the amazing place it is today, but it was good. We loved each other. We were existing. We had almost divorced and then didn't, and decided to choose back into each other. But I would call that like what morphed into Joe like version 1, right? There was a lot of life-changing things that had happened up to that point, and I had just kind of dealt with them the best I knew how. But I hadn't really ever taken the time to stop and be like, what does Joe really look like? Who is he? And what does he actually want? I couldn't have answered any of those questions. Again, I had a great job. It wasn't like, oh, I need to make more money. Well, we can always say we want to make more money. It was not like, oh, I can't pay the bills, right? I was making really good money. I was paying the bills. We were taking vacations. We were going places. Like, life was pretty good. Even Debbie's mental health was getting much better. And so I look back at that and I'm like, maybe that's Joe version 1.0, right? Now I look now to where I'm at right now, and it might be like Joe version 3. Where that versioning stops, I don't know. My goal is continually to improve myself, and that's the kind of the journey I set out on about 6 years ago. Maybe before that, maybe 7. No, that's not as important. But I look at that, and I go back to saying, if I had continued to do what I had been doing, right? I look back at my life 6, 7 years ago. That's what I had been doing. I've been doing the same thing. But there's this concept of, if we just keep doing the same thing, then eventually things will change. Right? And how this falls into the attitude of growth is, we look at ourselves, right? We always look at growth externally, right? When people say growth, how is growth in your business? We always like, well, last year I made X amount. This year I'm on target to make maybe more, hopefully, right? I've done plenty of talks where I've broken down income levels into kind of buckets. And there's a whole mental gymnastics that we play when we hit certain milestones with income. And that's important, right? That's part of the attitude of growth. The other part too is when we look internally, because those same thresholds happen inside, right? They look a little different, but they still happen on the inside. So if we look on the inside, we're like, what needs to change? So again, if I go back to where I was pretty happy. I was just hanging out, like living life. I thought I was fulfilled, right? But then someone gave me a glimpse of something different. I'd kind of capped out back then with as much money as I was probably going to make in the field I was in. I would have got like merit increases and small increases, but not anything drastic. Same for retirement, just to like work for another at least 20 something years, right? If not more, maybe another 30 years at that point. Well, back then it would have been another 30 years at least, maybe 35, doing the same thing I was doing, being the same person I was. That always bothered me, right? That always bothered me because I'm like, is this all life is? Is this all that it can happen? Right? I was about 35 at that time. I've been working for a long time. Right? To go back and watch videos, I actually started delivering papers when I was like 10. Probably 10, 11, that time frame, right? Worked in a greenhouse when I was 14. Like, I've always been working, and I'm like, I got another 35 years of this. I don't know if I like this, but I have a better solution. And I started working on myself, right? Subconsciously, I'm like, I want something more. And we usually get to this point where we want something more, we just don't know what it is. And then we hear a message, and we're like, hey, maybe that's what I'm looking for, right? Because the inside of us, the inside of all of us, there's this piece that wants to become something different, something better, a better version of ourselves. And not because the version of ourselves sucks, mind you. Not because we hate on ourselves. The attitude of growth never says, oh, you got to hate on yourself and then you can get better. That's not what it says. What it says is that we understand where we're at, we want something different. And again, externally, it's really easy to map because we just look at like business revenue, and it shows us that we're growing. But once we hit those milestones, it's very finite. It's like a finite mindset. It doesn't make sense, right? Because we hit the milestones, we hit the milestones, we hit the milestones. We can always increase them, but for what gain? I mean, that's why I always talk impact. What's the impact you want to make? Those milestones are going to be indicators if you're working towards that. But then if we look at the inside, there are no indicators, right? Those indicators don't exist because those are external monetary indicators. So if we look on the inside and look at the finite mindset, then maybe it's like we set goals and we accomplish those. But I want to change it, right? Because legacy and impact are really important to me. So if we think beyond that, I think more into an infinite mindset. And some of the stuff in thinking about this was I read the Infinite Game by Simon Sinek, which is an excellent book. If you haven't read it, go read it. Like buy it, read it today. I love it. Like there's so much juiciness in there. But look at that and be like, for our internal growth, if we want to be different, then we need to do something different. We have to put ourselves in a different situation if we want to grow. Because what happened yesterday is only going to get us as far as today, but it won't get us to tomorrow. Does that make sense? And if tomorrow we want something different, then we have to do something different today. We have to start working on the inside. Because we want the growth piece is so important, because if we can't grow, then it's hard for us to see new perspectives. It's hard for us to challenge old perspectives. It's hard for us to see ourselves as the thing that we have to change to make life different. Okay? Because so many of us want to blame other people. And sure, things happen all the time from other people. People interact with us and act upon us. But here's the difference. We have the choice to be able to choose how we want to respond, even if something happens to us. The choice is always ours. It really is. And sometimes that's just how do we want to respond? What do we want to do about it? I know there's trauma victims and there's traumas in everybody's past. And there's varying degrees of that trauma, and I understand that. And I'm sorry that it happened. Our choice, though, is so incredibly powerful that we get to choose how we respond. So when we start looking at growth overall, especially the attitude of growth, and looking to be like everything can grow, but in a container. Now, that doesn't mean you have to stay in the container, and that's the cool part about it. You get to choose if you move yourself to a new container and how far you stretch and how far you want to expand to fill the space you're in. And that's just not externally, that's internally as well. If you don't like your results today, it's time to do something different. It's time to look at yourself and say, what can I do different tomorrow on the inside that have different results than today? It's really powerful. Sometimes that's going to be like, guess what? I just need to quit for today. And that's totally okay. Sometimes it could be like, hey, I need to contact these 5 people because they're going to help me get to where I want to go. Sometimes it requires the networking. Sometimes it requires the self-care for you. But if we don't know ourselves well enough to understand what we want, then it's really hard to do any of those things. So I'm going to challenge all of you this week. Take an inventory. Are you where you want to be? If the answer is no, which I secretly hope that it is no, then the question is, what do you want to do different so you can be somewhere different? What does that new version of you look like? What does that new version of what you're creating look like? Because if we can get passionate about that, if we can get passionate about ourselves, and we're like, yes, this is who I want to be, and write it down, then we can start to change where we end up. And in that process, we change as well. we become that better version of ourselves, that 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, 15.0. I don't know. Where's the versioning stop? I don't know. But we get to be in control of that. We'll see up level. We'll set new version with new features. Or is that feature, that I now speak only highly of myself and I don't put myself down? It's a great step. What I do know, okay, and here's the little secret and tying it back into money. What I do know is that as we work on the internal dialogue with ourselves, as we grow internally, people take note. And now the people who used to be no's for your services and what you're selling can now become yeses. And it happens all the time. So you got to work on you, right? Take the attitude of growth. And I've talked a lot of like external factors and things we work on externally. Now it's time to take and turn that internally. Have a more infinite mindset of what you want to create for you long term. And where does it stop? Well, I hope you're with me in saying it doesn't. Because as we can buy into that, then we know there's always things we can do to improve. That doesn't mean we need to get mad at ourselves for the past things. But just think about yourself and where you want to go and what you want to happen and turn it inward, because when we work on the inside, when we work on this inside monologue and the inside growth, then the growth on the outside becomes exponentially easier. Okay? So think about that. I want you to answer that this week. Where do I want to go? Do I like myself? Do I like where I'm at? What do I want this new version to look like? And it doesn't matter where you're at. Because if you choose into you, there can always be a higher version of yourself. Okay? So let me know in the comments like what you want to do. How can you lean in and change from the inside? And as you do that, again, like I said, you'll start seeing results on the outside. So, some food for thought this week on the attitude of growth. Leave in the comments below, who you want to be. Like, what do you want that new version of yourself to be? What one thing do you want to change? And as you do that, I promise you, you'll see more money in your business. Till next week, we'll catch you later. Bye.